Welcome to the Deeper Thinking podcast. The most consequential promise of artificial intelligence is not that a machine will think like a person. It is that an institution will no longer have to admit that a person made the decision. A loan is declined, a welfare payment is suspended, a worker is ranked as unproductive, a patient is assigned a level of risk, a student is marked as suspicious, a customer is told that no exception can be made. In every case, people have designed the categories, selected the data, chosen the threshold, and decided what will happen next. Yet by the time the decision reaches the person who must live with it, the human choices inside it have disappeared. The system has spoken. This is one reason artificial intelligence has become so attractive to large organizations. It does not merely promise speed, it promises distance. It allows authority to act while becoming less visible as authority. The institution can present a judgment as a technical result, a probability, a recommendation, or an automated response. What was once an argument between people becomes an output generated elsewhere. The fantasy is not intelligence without limits. It is power without encounter. Public debate about AI is often organized around a narrower question, whether the system is intelligent, accurate, or capable of performing a task once reserved for a professional. These questions matter, but a technically impressive system can still produce a degraded institution. A model can become more capable while the people working around it become less able to understand, challenge, or correct what the organization is doing. The relevant measure is not simply what the machine can produce, it is what the institution becomes after it begins to rely on the machine. A useful tool can enlarge human capacity. A writer can use a language model to identify repetition. A doctor can use a model to draw attention to an anomaly. In each case, the person remains capable of judging the result, refusing it, and understanding the consequences of acting on it. The same capability changes character when inserted into a system organized around throughput, labor reduction, or managerial control. The writer becomes an editor of endless synthetic drafts. The programmer becomes responsible for code they did not have time to understand. The doctor becomes the legal signature beneath a machine-generated judgment delivered at a pace that makes judgment ceremonial. A person is inserted into the remaining gaps of an automated process and made responsible for keeping it moving. The technology has not changed. The relationship has. Industrial systems have repeatedly promised to remove human weakness while quietly redesigning people around the needs of machinery, measurement, and capital. Frederick Winslow Taylor treated knowledge held by workers as a management problem. Skill could become independence, negotiation, and resistance. The answer was to observe the work, divide it into measurable motions, and transfer authority from the person performing the task to the system defining it. Artificial intelligence intensifies this transfer because it can imitate the surface of judgment. Earlier systems issued instructions. Newer systems can produce explanations, summaries, recommendations, and conversational reassurance. They do not merely tell the worker what to do. They can generate the language through which the institution explains what has been done. This creates a new form of organizational ventriloquism. The decision appears to speak for itself. The simplification of the world so it can be administered from a distance. James C. Scott described this as legibility. The simplification is never identical to reality. It is a map constructed for a purpose. The danger begins when the map gains the authority to punish the territory for failing to resemble it. Australia's robo-debt scheme offers a severe example. Annual income data was averaged across shorter welfare reporting periods, producing alleged debts that could diverge from what recipients had actually earned in particular fortnights. The burden was then shifted onto individuals to disprove the government's calculation. An administrative inference acquired the force of a debt notice. The failure was not simply a bad formula. It was an institutional reorganization of uncertainty. The state's estimate became presumptively real. The citizen's life became the anomaly requiring correction. People were compelled to reconstruct old payslips, contact former employers, and navigate an apparatus that had already classified them as owing money. Uncertainty did not disappear. It moved downward, along with the labour, fear, and cost of resolving it. This is one of automation's least examined powers. It can move uncertainty without appearing to move anything. An institution may become more certain because everyone outside it is forced to absorb the doubt. The British Post Office Horizon scandal emerged through different technology, but a related structure. Accounting discrepancies attributed to the Horizon system were treated as evidence against sub-postmasters, many of whom were prosecuted, financially ruined, or both. The computer's records acquired a presumption of reliability that individual testimony could not overcome. When people insisted that the figures did not correspond to the reality of their branches, their disagreement was treated as dishonesty rather than information. The machine did not need to be conscious to dominate the encounter. It only needed the institution to believe that disagreement with the machine was less credible than the machine itself. All systems fail. People make mistakes. Databases contain omissions. Sensors register the wrong condition. Models generalize badly beyond the patterns on which they were trained. A healthy institution expects error and creates pathways through which reality can return. It preserves the authority of people close to the situation. It allows exceptions to carry information back into the design. A brittle institution does the opposite. It treats the exception as a threat to the system's legitimacy. The worker who reports a problem becomes resistant. The customer who cannot fit the form becomes difficult. The professional who slows the process becomes inefficient. The person closest to the failure is recoded as the failure. AI can make this brittleness feel sophisticated. A model produces fluent language around a decision, and fluency is easily mistaken for understanding. The answer arrives complete, even when the process beneath it is probabilistic, incomplete, or opaque. The institution gains not only an output, but a synthetic explanation capable of closing the conversation. This is why conversational systems are so useful to organizations whose real problem is not a lack of information, but the cost of being answerable. A customer service worker may recognize that a policy is producing an absurd result. They can hear distress, notice contradiction, and escalate a case. They may also become frustrated, careless, or constrained by scripts. Human service is not automatically humane, but a person remains a possible site of moral interruption. They can decide that the situation does not fit. An automated agent can be designed so that nothing ever reaches such a moment. It can apologize, restate the policy, offer another menu, and simulate concern while ensuring that the institution remains unavailable. The customer experiences responsiveness without access. The conversation continues, but no encounter occurs. This is not failed communication, it is successful containment. The system's purpose may not be to solve every problem. It may be to reduce the number of problems that become expensive for the organization. A long queue, a confusing appeals process, or a chatbot that repeatedly returns the customer to the same answer can be described as poor service. From another position, each may be an efficient method for exhausting claims. Automation often succeeds by relocating labor. The company records a reduction in handling time. The customer repeats their history to multiple systems. The employer reports productivity gains. The worker spends the evening correcting generated output. The government reduces administrative staff. The citizen becomes an unpaid investigator of the state's mistake. Nothing has been removed. The work has been pushed beyond the boundary of what the institution counts. This creates a shadow workforce of automation. The dispersed population required to repair, interpret, and endure systems officially described as labor-saving. Customers train interfaces through their corrections. Workers clean data. Families navigate eligibility systems. Artists monitor synthetic imitations of their work. Professionals absorb liability for machine recommendations. The organization receives the efficiency while the world performs the maintenance. Economic measurement struggles to see this because the labor appears inconvenience, anxiety, waiting, repetition, or private time. It does not arrive on the institution's payroll, yet it is essential to the system's functioning. The machine seems autonomous because its dependencies have been hidden inside other people's lives. Those dependencies extend backward as well as outward. Large models rely upon immense archives of human expression, layers of data preparation, content moderation, evaluation, and physical infrastructure. The interface presents a clean exchange between user and machine. Behind it stands a dense social and material arrangement. Writers, programmers, annotators, contractors, factory workers, power systems, water systems, logistics networks and communities asked to host the machinery. The appearance of autonomy is one of the product's most carefully maintained effects. The system answers alone. The system was never alone. This suggests a more useful divide than the familiar opposition between human and machine. The real distinction is between systems people can participate in and systems that require submission without understanding. Participation means more than placing a person in the loop. That phrase has become dangerously reassuring. A reviewer may be formally present while possessing no practical capacity to intervene. They may face hundreds of outputs an hour, be punished for slowing the process or lack access to the information required to challenge the recommendation. Their approval becomes a ritual performed after the meaningful decisions have already been made. The person is included so the institution can say humanity was included. When a system is usually correct, people learn to trust it. When it is presented as more objective than human judgment, disagreement begins to feel irresponsible. Under time pressure, accepting the recommendation becomes the path of least resistance. Reliability in ordinary cases weakens the attention required for extraordinary ones. This is not a moral failure by the worker. It is a predictable feature of cognition under repetition. A professional asked to review a small number of difficult cases may contribute genuine judgment. The same professional asked to approve a constant stream of mostly plausible outputs will gradually become part of the interface. Their expertise remains available in theory but inaccessible in practice. The danger is clearest in safety-critical systems, where failure is often described afterward as the mistake of the last human touching the process. Yet disasters rarely begin with one person's final action. The last person in the chain was visible, the chain was not. AI systems risk reproducing this pattern across less dramatic but more numerous decisions. A teacher receives a plagiarism probability. A manager receives a productivity score. A clinician receives a diagnostic ranking. A bank employee receives a fraud alert. Each output may be presented as advisory, but advice becomes command when the cost of disagreement is high and the system's authority is institutionally protected. Automated systems frequently serve a political purpose inside organizations. They allow leaders to standardize decisions across distance, reduce local discretion, and make performance measurable. This can correct genuine inconsistency and prejudice. Human judgment is not innocent. It can be arbitrary, discriminatory, inattentive, and corrupt. But removing discretion does not remove values. It relocates them. Every model contains a theory of relevance. It decides which differences matter and which can be ignored. Every optimization target defines success narrowly enough to be counted. Every threshold distributes the cost of error. A fraud system can catch more suspicious transactions by blocking more legitimate ones. A hiring model can reduce recruiter workload by excluding unconventional candidates. A hospital can improve average throughput while making complex patients harder to treat. The system does not discover the correct balance. Someone chooses whose inconvenience is acceptable. This is where the language of bias can become too narrow. Bias suggests a departure from a neutral system. Yet many harms arise when the system functions exactly as designed. A benefits process may be optimized to reduce expenditure. A scheduling system may be optimized to increase labor utilization. A platform may be optimized to maximize engagement. The resulting damage is not necessarily an error in the model. It may be the successful expression of the institution's objective. The deeper question is not only whether the model is fair, it is whether the objective deserves to be optimized. Hannah Arendt understood judgment as an activity that cannot be reduced to rule following. Judgment begins where the rule becomes insufficient, where a person must confront the particularity of a situation and imagine how an action appears from another position. It requires a shared world in which other people are not merely variables inside a process. Artificial intelligence can assist this activity by revealing patterns, retrieving information, and challenging memory. It can also be used to abolish the conditions judgment requires. An organization can become cognitively rich and morally stupid. It can know more about the population while becoming less capable of seeing a person. This contradiction lies near the center of the AI project. The technology expands the capacity to classify, predict, and generate. At the same moment, institutions are weakening the human relationships through which classifications are corrected, predictions are interpreted, and generated language is held accountable. The result is not the removal of judgment. It is judgment that no longer recognizes itself as judgment. A probability becomes a reason, a correlation becomes suspicion, a ranking becomes merit, a generated answer becomes policy. Political and ethical choices become difficult to contest because they have been translated into technical form. AI organizes an architecture of permission. Who may challenge an output? Who can see the evidence behind it? Who bears the cost of delay? Who is entitled to demand a human review? Who is believed when the data and the lived account conflict? Who has the authority to stop the system rather than merely correct one result? These questions determine whether AI functions as an instrument or an institution. An instrument remains subordinate to a purpose people can debate. An institution creates procedures, dependencies, and constituencies of its own. Once embedded, an AI system may shape hiring, budgeting, staffing, and expectations. Work is redesigned around its outputs. Records are formatted to suit it. Employees are trained to use it. Managers become dependent on the metrics it produces. Removing the system then appears more disruptive than accepting its failures. The technology becomes necessary because the organization has rebuilt itself so that the technology is necessary. This is how optional tools become infrastructure. Infrastructure is powerful partly because it recedes from view. People encounter its consequences without repeatedly confronting the decisions built into it. A road favors certain journeys. A database favors certain identities. Once the arrangement feels normal, alternatives begin to appear unrealistic. AI companies sell not only software, but a future state of the organization, fewer staff, faster decisions, continuous availability, personalization at scale, knowledge accessible on demand. These promises contain genuine possibilities. They also encourage leaders to treat existing workers, procedures, and forms of expertise as temporary inefficiencies awaiting replacement. The strongest claim is often made before the evidence exists. Staff are reduced in anticipation of productivity. Services are redesigned around an expected capability. The institution becomes dependent on the promised future, which makes admitting disappointment more costly. A tool that was supposed to save money must now justify the money already spent and the people already removed. This produces automation debt. Technical debt is the future cost created by expedient design decisions. Automation debt accumulates when an institution removes people, knowledge, and redundancy before a system has demonstrated that it can carry what has been transferred to it. The immediate savings are visible. The lost capacity appears later during exceptions, crises, and change. A company discovers that no one understands the old process. A public agency cannot explain why a category exists. A newsroom loses the editors who recognized legal danger. A software team can generate more code but cannot maintain the expanding system. A hospital increases diagnostic throughput while weakening the relationships that reveal when a patient's condition does not fit the model. The organization has not merely adopted a tool, it has spent its memory. This is why experienced workers are often described as resistant during technological change. Their objections slow deployment. They remember previous failures, hidden dependencies, and informal practices that do not appear in process maps. Some resistance is self-protection, some is conservatism. But resistance can also be an institution's sensory system registering damage before management has a metric for it. Friction is not always waste. Sometimes friction is information arriving from reality. The desire to remove friction can become a desire to remove contradiction. Executives often encounter the organization through dashboards, presentations, and summaries. Each layer compresses uncertainty. By the time information reaches the top, the texture of the work has been translated into indicators suitable for decision. Generative AI offers a further compression. It can summarize the summaries, answer questions about the dashboard, and produce the language of confidence around incomplete evidence. The leader experiences an organization that appears immediately intelligible, but easier access can conceal a loss of contact. The answer is easier to obtain because the difficult parts have been averaged away. A system that always answers may reduce the chance that anyone notices the question was malformed. This is the seduction of synthetic competence. It does not require the machine to know everything. It requires the user to feel that nothing important remains outside the answer. For concentrated power, this feeling is especially dangerous. Wealth and hierarchy already reduce the frequency of contradiction. People learn which truths are welcome. Staff convert uncertainty into confidence. Consultants translate conflict into options. A conversational system completes the environment by offering endless responsiveness without independent interests. It does not need recognition, rest, dignity, or persuasion. It will not remember being ignored. The danger is not that machines will become too human. It is that institutions will use them to make human beings easier to treat as noise. This does not make opposition to AI simple. A critique that treats the technology as useless will fail because the technology is useful. Models can help people write, analyze, translate, search, design, and discover. They can extend access to expertise and make difficult tools easier to use. The capacity is real, but usefulness is not destiny. Technical capability creates possibilities. Institutions select among them, and power influences the selection. The crucial struggle is over arrangement. Will AI give workers greater command over their tools, or make work more measurable from above? Will it widen access to knowledge, or turn access into dependence on a few platforms? Will it help public institutions explain decisions, or allow them to avoid explanation? Will it reduce repetitive labour while preserving skill, time, and employment? Or will every saved minute be converted into a higher quota? The answer will not be contained in the model. It will be contained in contracts, staffing levels, appeal rights, procurement rules, professional standards, ownership structures, and the ordinary permissions granted inside workplaces. A humane deployment would begin by refusing several convenient fictions. Efficiency is not self-defining. It always belongs to someone. A system can be efficient for the organization while producing delay, confusion, and unpaid labor for the public. Costs do not disappear because they leave the balance sheet. A human presence does not guarantee human control. Control requires time, information, authority, and the practical ability to disagree without punishment. An explanation cannot simply be generated after the decision. A fluent account is not the same as a traceable reason. People affected by a decision need to know what evidence mattered, which rules were applied, where uncertainty entered, and who can change the outcome. Scale does not create neutrality. It multiplies both benefit and error. A small injustice repeated automatically becomes an administrative environment. Replacement is not the natural measure of innovation. A system may be most valuable when it allows a person to do less, notice more, or remain with a problem longer. Productivity can mean preserving attention rather than increasing output. These principles are also political limits. They require institutions to accept that some forms of friction are protective. Appeals cost money. Redundancy appears inefficient. Local discretion creates inconsistency. Professional autonomy slows command. Yet, these may be the means by which a system discovers it is wrong. An institution without friction can move quickly. It can also move beyond correction. The central problem of AI is not whether machines will replace human intelligence. Human intelligence has never existed as a detachable substance sitting inside individual workers. It is distributed across relationships, practices, memories, disagreements, and institutions. It appears in the nurse who notices that the chart does not match the patient, the clerk who recognizes that the form has no category for this life, the engineer who remembers the workaround, no manual records, the editor who senses that a sentence is technically clear but morally false. When these people are removed, the organization does not simply lose labor, it loses ways of knowing. AI may reproduce the visible outputs of that knowledge for a time. It can generate the report, the response, the image, the recommendation. But an output is not the entire practice that made the output reliable. The practice includes correction, responsibility, apprenticeship, context, and the capacity to recognize when the usual method should not be used. Institution cannot preserve judgment by generating judgment-shaped sentences. The issue reaches beyond the relationship between worker and machine. It concerns the architecture through which reality is allowed to enter an institution. Every organization requires some way of discovering that its representation of the world is incomplete. Sometimes that discovery arrives as data. Often it arrives as refusal, delay, complaint, professional doubt, or a person insisting that the system's description is not what happened. These moments are easy to classify as inefficiency. They may be the last remaining evidence that the institution still inhabits a shared world. The most dangerous AI system will not necessarily be the one that makes the most dramatic mistake. It may be the one that makes ordinary decisions smoothly enough that no one remembers they could have been made differently. Its outputs will settle into procedures. Its categories will become common sense. Its language will become the institution's language. Responsibility will diffuse across vendors, managers, data teams, and frontline staff until every individual can truthfully say they did not make the decision alone. The institution will continue to act. Its authorship will become difficult to locate. That is the permission machine. It does not remove human choice. It reorganizes choice so that those exercising power appear to be following the system, while those living with the consequences are required to argue with it. The machine grants permission to proceed. The organization grants itself permission not to listen. The alternative is not to reject artificial intelligence. It is to build institutions in which intelligence, human or artificial, remains answerable to the world it acts upon. Systems must be contestable before they become indispensable. Workers must retain the authority to slow, refuse, and revise. People affected by automated decisions must have access to meaningful explanation and appeal. The cost of uncertainty must remain with the institution creating the decision, not be transferred automatically to the person least equipped to bear it. Most importantly, organizations must preserve the people and practices through which error becomes visible. A system capable of producing an answer is not necessarily capable of knowing when the answer has damaged the world. For that, it still needs someone who can answer back. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Deeper Thinking podcast. The Deeper Thinking podcast explores new philosophical ground by examining our rapidly evolving digital and political landscape. Each episode is built through rigorous ethical and research-based protocols. I use a digital narrator to help manage the workload. My goal is to invite fresh perspectives, thoughtful curiosity, and deeper understanding. Every episode takes considerable time and reflection to produce. Throughout the process, I'm guided by a strong moral core. If you enjoy my work, please consider letting me and others know. A review or rating on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, or your preferred platform makes an enormous difference. Your support helps the podcast reach new listeners, fosters meaningful discussion, and keeps this project alive. Until next time.